Let's do this.
I hereby call this meeting to order. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope the hurricane or the tornado, whatever the heck it was, or whatever they were, didn't do too much damage to anybody. I understand an airplane made an emergency landing today, was that? At Crystal, at Inverness, and no damage, no deaths reported. And Crystal River, I heard from them, they have no damage, so skated by. Anyway,
Yeah.
thanks for coming, everybody. If I could bother you, please, to get up and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. As everybody knows, I just came back from visiting our former bosses. I was in England for a couple of weeks, hiking. It's a very good time. Up the border between England and Scotland.
Yep.
Emperor Hadrian built a wall up there, Hadrian's Wall, and one can hike the whole thing. It's all clearly marked and everything. So some friends of mine and I set out, and to prove that even at our advanced age, we could still do stuff like that. So
All right.
it was about 90 miles altogether, and we survived. It was a good time. And we're still speaking to each other at the end of the hike. So it's always good. It's important. Ms. Jenkins,
Yes, sir.
could I bother you please to do the roll call? Let us know who's here.
Absolutely. In attendance today, we have Carl Flanagan,
Present.
Mark Klingel.
Here.
Mr. Michael should be on his way. George McDonald,
Here.
Keith Pulias,
Here.
and Heiko Kallenbach.
Here.
Absent, I am showing Charles Carr and tentatively Mr. Michael.
So far. Thank you. Appreciate it. Has everybody had a chance to review last month's minutes? I looked at them and I saw nothing amiss. Without objection, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve last month's minutes.
Move.
So moved by Carl. Second? Second by Mark. Discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The minutes are approved. Thank you very much. I'd like to throw the meeting open to the public. If anybody has anything to say, did you want to introduce some of the folks in the back? Todd?
I can do it after open to the public if you want, or do you want it right now? It's fine with me.
Oh, either way. Do they have anything to say at this point?
I don't think so, but whenever we talk about projects, I'm sure they will.
Good.
Okay.
All right. So yeah, just to let you know, we have some consultants, some of the county's consultants here to talk specifically about some of the ongoing projects. Give us a bit more information, rather than Todd saying, "Let me go back and check."
Yes.
No more. Anybody from the public have anything they'd like to say?
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Rogers with the EAA, Vice President and also the Young Eagles Coordinator.
Good afternoon. Got a quick question for you. What's the last word on your shirt?
Do you even lift? You have to figure the formula for it.
Oh, yeah.
Of course. Do you even lift?
Okay.
It's
All
a
right,
gym
fair
joke,
enough.
not
Do
a
you
good
even
one,
lift?
but
I like it.
anyway, if you may or may not have seen, we had our first rally last Saturday. Flew 40 kids. It was a very good success. Just received back the last of the feedback from all the pilots and the volunteers that we had involved. Some good feedback, a couple of little things to tweak out on our future events, but hoping to do it every 2 to 3 months from here on out, probably with the exception of over the summer. But other than that, it went very well, got good coverage. Hopefully it'll help build our chapter up a little bit more as well. So
There you go. When's your next chapter meeting?
it'll be not this Saturday, but next Saturday, 21st.
21st.
Yes. And that's
Thanks.
held at Wright Rudder Aviation.
Gotcha. What time?
9 o'clock is social hour, and then usually 10 o'clock is when a speaker comes in and does presentation and stuff.
Okay.
And then at 11, they have a IMC VMC club
Gotcha.
that meets after that.
Thank you. Sorry? Anybody else?
Hello, Andy Chan with Right Rudder Aviation. So a couple things. We have the Mesa Pilot Development Program going strong. I'm sure you guys all noticed the traffic. Still a great success. We're continuing that program. Lots of maintenance going on with that as well. As you alluded to, we did have, just before I drove here, a Technam owned by the Technam factory that was on its way from Sebring, where the U.S. base is, to the National Business Aviation Association base, Business Aviation Convention and Exposition in Las Vegas. Had a engine failure, and they were luckily able to land safely at the Inverness Airport. He landed about 20 feet short of the runway. No damage to the facility, no damage to the plane or to the pilot, the sole occupant of the pilot. We were able to recover the aircraft to reopen the airport, but just before I came here.
May I ask what time that was?
Sorry?
Well, may I ask what time that occurred?
So that would have been 1:30
Okay.
p.m. roughly in that time frame.
So right before you got here.
Right before I got here, yes. Pilot did declare an emergency with Jacksonville Approach. Made the call to Jacksonville Approach on the phone with me present to let them know that they had landed safely. We are collecting information to dispense to the FAA and NTSB as appropriate at this point in time. But lucky he's just fine, a little shaken, but just fine. So great news there. Great placement of the aircraft, great pilotage, if I may say so. Let's see. Okay, so we had Right Rudder Aviation was proud to host the Citrus County Chamber of Commerce for Business Appreciation Month, the Chamber Mixer at our facility last week. A huge success. I think the numbers were we had around 350 people show up for that marketing and networking event. The community really, really enjoyed it, and a lot of fun to get people out to the airport that don't normally come to the airport. So excellent success there, and very happy to the team for making that happen at Right Rudder Aviation. Just so you remember, we do host another event for an additional nonprofit, Citrus County Blessings. If you recall, their organization's goal is to feed the kids of Citrus County on the weekends where they're not provided with food by any other source. And unfortunately, because of what's going on in the economy, the number of students that they feed has increased significantly, and the cost of that food has increased significantly, as we'll talk about CPI later on. And so fundraising is even more important. The Blessings Ball that Right Rudder Aviation is proud to host annually is held this year on the 21st. It is a ticketed event. It is a fundraising event, so if you are able to buy tickets and make donations to Blessings, we certainly appreciate that. It's also the county's biggest costume event where you dress up in the competition. So looking forward to that event on the 21st. It is the primary fundraiser for Blessings. The second one that I have is called Birdings for Blessings, which is obviously a golf tournament that they put on. I know we're going to be talking about CPI earlier on, and Keith, you and I were talking about this. Of course, when the county increases the CPI rates and chooses to do so at a high CPI area rather than our area, it affects all the tenants. Because our leases, the starting date of most of our leases don't immediately coincide with the timing of the county changing the CPI rates. That varies, and as we've been communicating the unusually high CPI to our clients, we have several customers, hangar tenants, who are vehemently opposed to using the Tampa Bay CPI versus one that would make sense in our local area here. And so they weren't all able to make it, but they did want me to express that they're very displeased with that choice to use an alternate area's CPI rate. Right Rudder Aviation is ready to build a $5 million building if we are able to come to terms with the county on a lease. We would like to do so. I've tried to do so for the last 12 months or so and haven't made it anywhere. So I'd like to ask for the board's blessing to see if the board would like for Right Rudder to make this investment into the community and urge the county to accept, to accept our investment and allow us to fund a hangar that will allow us to add additional six-figure jobs here in the county. That is going to be a priority for us over the next couple of months, because if we are unable to secure a lease, we will unfortunately be not able to make the investment beyond a certain time, or we'll have to make the investment elsewhere. if we're unable to reach agreeable terms with the county. As far as the grants, I know they're not on the agenda. I do wish they were added to the agenda. If you do recall, there's two $5 million grants with the Florida Department of Commerce that I personally wrote 3 years ago. The new Director of Economic Development at the county, Frank, has since taken over one of the grants that the county is applying for. The other is with Cucci Technical College. The Department of Commerce keeps me up to date on that since they are aware that I originally wrote the grants. At this point in time, the grants do need to be revised in order for the state to consider funding those. The state has expressed interest in funding the grants if the county and with the Cucci Technical College is able to rewrite them in this funding cycle. So that is something, if we could put a resolution or something to get those rewritten, that is something that the Department of Commerce really wants to fund, but is unable to with the current status of the grants. There's been an increase of strikes at the Inverness Airport, most likely because of the increased bird strikes of the increased activity. We had two birds that we believe were decapitated. We believe by a Phenom 300 simultaneously in one day. We've reported that, of course, to Todd and took pictures and kept a feather. That was in one day, and then a day or two ago, unfortunately, one of the Mesa aircraft killed one sandhill crane and apparently injured another. I just found that out today. So the sandhill cranes are becoming more of an issue than they have in the past. So just to bring that up, and that is something that we did bring up in the past, and we did a little bit of research. Todd, you may probably not aware of it, about 3 years ago, because about 3 years ago, it seems to go in cycles, the bird activity. About 3 years ago, there was tremendous bird activity for about a month for whatever reason. There were thousands of these white birds at the Inverness Airport for no reason that we could understand. And they're just literally flocks and flocks of them. So we did a little bit of research. Quincy did and provided that. If we do need to take action, sandhill cranes are protected. However, as an airport, the airport can be given the authority to have them removed, even though they are protected if it comes to endangering human lives, which at this point, two airplane strikes, maybe we're getting there. There's still regularly tortoise activity on the field, but they can more easily be avoided, so we haven't had any of those, luckily. On the agenda, I didn't see the ball markers for CGC on the agenda, so I just wanted to bring that up, that I don't see that on the agenda, but that is something that, of course, I think should be on there until that is completed. Overall, things are doing great at the Inverness Airport, and excited as always to keep doing what we're doing. Any questions?
Yeah, a couple. Anybody else have anything before I go?
I may be a tad out of the loop. The building, is that for the purpose of A&P for airframe and power plant mechanic training?
So there's two grants for that program. One is with the Citrus County BOCC, and that is for a $5 million grant to build a hangar to do two things. It would house the A&P training program. Half of the building would be used for that. The other half of the building would be for Wright Rudder Aviation's use. The building needs to be used by two different entities in order to qualify for the grants. And so that's part of the purpose for that. And then separately, we do need one hangar just for that. Because that program needs classroom space for computers, it needs welding space, it needs electrical space, airframe space, engine space, and then ramp space as well for that program. And then separately, the $5 million hangar that Wright Rudder can bring to the table is just for a general building for our use. That could include, right now our top revenue is maintenance, actually. So the number one thing we do as a company in terms of revenue is aircraft maintenance. So with that in mind, I actually have two additional aircraft mechanic positions open at this point in time. We did hire 3 last month, which we're super excited about because A&Ps are hard to come by. But we have 2 additional positions open. And if we were able to build an additional 20 to 30,000 square foot building, it is likely we'd be able to expand our A&P side of things. But it could be aircraft sales, it could be hangaring. There's not a single turbine fixed wing aircraft based at the Inverness Airport, nor has there been because of a lack of hangar space available.
And correct me if I'm wrong, the issue before with the county commissioners, they had one idea about how long the lease should be, and y'all had a different idea. Was that it?
Well, the history of it was such that when Wright Rudder Aviation came to the county in 2018, the leases that existed were intentionally prohibitive to prohibit people from building buildings. And because of that, at the Inverness Airport, there wasn't a single building built other than Herb, who had built his building about 28 years ago, until Dr. Montgomery wanted to build a hangar. And because of the terms at the time, he was going to go to Marion County to build a hangar. But at the time, we got with Quincy and the board here and said, why don't we do a study to understand what the landscape is like and get our prices and the terms of the contract in line with everyone else. And that was done by Quincy and the team. And it resulted in a lease that was approved by this board, recommended by this board, and then brought to the BOCC, who also approved the lease for all subsequent leases. After Dr. Montgomery built his hangar, Steve Lamb was able to build his hangar in Crystal River. And then, of course, if you recall, there were 3 people who attempted to build a hangar utilizing that same lease who were denied, and they have since moved their investment to Marion County. And then, of course, we have $5 million ready to invest if we're able to build a hangar here as well. And so, I forget what the question is. So historically, what happened was at that time, I got the BOCC's approval, this board's approval, and Quincy's approval to go and seek financing to build our own hangar. It took me several years because it's very difficult to secure funding for a $5 million project, particularly when you don't own the land. But I was able to do so using the terms that were approved by this board and the BOCC. When I brought that back to the BOCC, they expressed interest in changing those terms from what was previously approved. And if that's the case, the terms that I have approved funding for are based on the terms that were previously approved, again, by this board and the BOCC. If those terms change or become worse, the funding disappears not by my choice, but by our private equity investors. Because they have to consider all investment opportunities at this point in time. And frankly, they've already wanted to pull out, mainly because, not because of this, but because there's other investment opportunities that have arisen with the current interest rates and factors like that, because this investor invests in multiple things. So multiple hangars out there, but one that the county is applying for the grant with the Department of Commerce, one that we'd like to fund, and then separately, there was meant to be an additional hangar that is built in the Inverness Airport sometime in the near future.
What the current point of perhaps disagreement there is in terms of, and I believe it is over the length of the lease. What does the county commission thinking they can accept, and what are you asking for?
What I'm asking for is the same terms that Dr. Montgomery and Steve Lamb were able to build their hangar on that was approved by both boards. That's what we would like. Or something better for the $5 million investment we're attempting to make in the community. What was offered was much less than that, and with terms that the investor would not agree with. And so we know, because again, 3 people just recently moved their investment to Marion, what terms Marion County is willing to offer, for example, if you were to build a building of that type. So that's one data point out there to compare it to. But of course, now there is the new study, which Wright Rudder is in favor of, because the commissioners state that they're not sure what an FBO lease should look like. Well, even though we provided, there's an FAA publication dedicated to airport sponsors such as Citrus County to provide guidance to the airport sponsors of what lease terms should look like and the rationale behind it. And in that document to airport sponsors, it says 30 to 60 years is traditional for FBOs, and it goes into the rationale behind it and the decisions behind that. Hopefully this study will understand that, for example, the FBO in Leesburg has a 50-year lease. The FBO in Ocala and in Brooksville have 50-year leases. But here in Citrus County, for example, the commissioners came to the airport and said, well, how come you haven't upgraded the flooring from, traditional vinyl flooring? Well, with the 5-year term, how can you justify spending $200,000 on improving the facility when you're at risk of getting evicted in 5 years with a week's notice? that's a very difficult thing to do. And so that's something in our plan. For example, we don't have enough bathrooms in our facility. The bathrooms that are built are very large and could fit 2 toilets each, but because of funding, at the time they were only built with 1 toilet each, right? But to redo the plumbing, everything like that is several tens of thousands of dollars, an investment we would like to make to beautify the airport, since it is a primary place where people make their first interaction with the county. But with a 5-year term, they're disincentivizing additional investments into the property. Because we know we're in severe risk of being evicted at the end of the term.
Forgive me, but we've got quite a bit of topic drift. The discussion was about the terms that you would like to see for the hangar.
The same terms that were offered to Dr.
Which
to
are
Steve
what?
Lamb and Dr. Montgomery. Sorry?
Which are what?
50 years.
50 years. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. And what do you have now?
So our lease is only 5 years, but it's unclear if the county is willing to lease land at this point in time to individual investors who want to build hangars, because the last 3 were, turned away. So it's not just a right rudder issue. It's a question of, is the county open to building buildings at all with private investment or not?
Anything else? Nope. Go ahead.
All right, so you're stating that the grants are gonna have to be revised?
The grants do need to be revised with direction and assistance from the Department of Commerce, Florida Department of Commerce, which they're willing and able to offer.
Okay, all right, and you're stating that it has to be 2 different grants. Can 2 different grants be applied to the same building, or do they have to be separate buildings?
So they're 2 separate grants. One is a workforce grant and one is an infrastructure grant. So the county's applying for the infrastructure grant for the hangar, and the workforce grant is being applied for by WTC. So that's part of the reason they're separate grants. Also because Florida, what was previously the Department of Economic Opportunities, now Department of Commerce, but at the time we submitted the grants, they said the maximum value of the grant request was around 5.5. And so that's another reason they had to be broken up into 2 separate grants, because originally we submitted one like $11 million grant, and they said we can't do that, they have to be separate. But the problem with separating them is if one is funded without the other, then you're it's difficult. But I think the Department of Commerce is aware of that, and I think if they funded one, they would fund both in my discussions with them.
Okay, all right.
Anybody else have any questions, comments? You said that you originally wrote these grants, and who are you looking to rewrite them, to revise them as needed?
So Frank is the Director of Economic Development at the county, but it also needs WTC. So it kind of needs to be, WTC together with Frank at the county, together with the Department of Commerce and myself. And just because I have the history and I'm the one who understands the 147 aspect more than any of them. So that's kind of who the meeting needs to be between. And Frank was able to make it to our chamber mixer, and he's amenable to doing that. So hopefully we get there soon, because the funding cycle is going to expire, and then we'll have to do the same thing again next year. So every year we apply, we have to get the BOCC to approve the application for the grant together with the school board. So you have to get 2 separate boards to approve it. So it is a little bit of work every time we reapply for the grant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just so you know, the balls are not on the agenda because the Board of County Commissioners is supposed to have discussed them on Tuesday.
Yeah, they were approved and we purchased them.
Great.
Oh, excellent.
Hence the omission. Thank you, Andy. Anybody else? Okay. On to new business. I see that there is nothing to note.
No, there isn't, but to hit on what you were saying earlier about the Sand Hill cranes, I did talk with a lady this morning. Her name escapes me at the time, but right now with the injured one, it's just kind of watching it. I know. just kind of watching in, that's really about it. There's nothing we can really do. If it's that injured, nature's going to take its course, but just steer clear.
Question for you on that, Todd. In those instances, do we call in those nonprofits that are typically veterinarians that can take care of the sandhill cranes to rehabilitate them?
There are rehabilitation centers and efforts. Besides calling Fish and Wildlife, I did happen to look up some in the county or in Florida as well.
Right.
And getting in touch with them depends on who you call, because they might have a specialty. One might take care of bats or small mammals
Right.
or whatever. So Fish and Wildlife can also help, but these other private entities or licensed entities can also help as well. Depending on the species, you just have to be careful and know what to do. The safest thing is to stop and do a little bit of research before you start messing with anything.
Right, right.
Am I answering your question?
Yeah, the only reason I asked that is I know that Dr. Casey Mayfield, who's been in the county for an extremely long period of time,
Okay.
had owned Midway Animal Clinic and continues to do so, and is involved with a lot of nonprofits.
Oh,
And I did not know whether or not they have been reached out and spoken to, because I see him at Rotary every Monday. I don't have a problem picking up the phone, calling him, and asking him, what would his suggestion be, and then to, provide Danae with the contact information if that works out.
no, I didn't know about this person, but
Okay.
yeah, accept any information to help out, sure.
Sure. Okay. All right. Let me reach out to Dr. Mayfield, and I'll find out if that's something that is in his skill set.
Mhm.
If it's not, I don't want to waste anybody's time. But if it is, or if he's got a contact, obviously, we're here to also take care of the wildlife.
Sure.
When it's injured inadvertently. But
Yeah.
again, to obviously sandhill cranes are very precious. So
Yeah, from what I heard though, that the injury that it sustained doesn't seem like it's going to be anything that can be rehabilitated. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
okay.
So
Okay.
anyway,
All right. Thank you very much.
no problem. Moving on to old business.
Old business?
Okay. Airport signage. We just today got the scope of work with my consultants, and we're going to be discussing that and the future of each airport having their own sign, their uniqueness, and landscaping to go along with it, where they're at. So just having more discussions about that.
Okay.
More to follow. All right. Runway 927 GPS approaches.
Our favorite
Our
subject.
favorite. Basically, you guys want GPS approaches. It's not going to happen until after we have an AGIS survey. And that's not going to be for a while.
Okay.
So right now, it's just going to be a visual runway. I did give you guys a handout. Did you receive that?
No.
You didn't? Michael?
It should be in the,
We
But
can
we
go
did
over
this.
this later, but there's a specific point on there that you can see how far out this goes. So you can
Ah,
potentially. We'll talk more about this, but that's just to kind of give you an idea of, and that AGIS survey will cover not only 927, but 1836 as well. So what I'd like to do is remove this from old business, because we really can't do anything right now. So every month we bring this up, it's going to be saying the same thing over and over again.
so currently there is a GPS approach to runway 27,
Okay.
and that obviously will
Yes, yeah.
will become NA at some point
Mhm.
when work begins.
Mhm.
Because the runway will be closed for a while, I would imagine. And so you're saying that at that point, there will be no instrument approach to GPS at all for 2 years? No, for about a year.
Well, besides 27, but whenever we get to, whenever we talk about the runway extension, we can go in a little bit more detail, if you're fine with that. Just for this in particular, what we have been discussing, it just keeps getting brought up, and I just know that it's kind of redundant. If you don't.
Okay.
I have someone specifically that can talk on this
You do?
later. I do.
Okay, good. Do they want to talk about it now?
We could, but I figured when we talk about the project, it'll tie this in as well. And we could talk more versus
enough.
bringing the person up.
Good
constantly.
enough.
Okay. On to the financial analysis and business planning study. I'd like to introduce Daniel Elsey. You could talk a little bit about that. That is currently underway, and Mr. Dave Byers is the gentleman who's conducting this study and analysis. So, with nothing further ado.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Daniel Elsey with Infrastructure Consulting and Engineering. I was here last month, talked to you guys about what our process is going to look like. Had a conversation with Dave this morning in preparation for this meeting. And so far, we've done our document discovery, looked at all the old financials, I've gotten participation from the FBOs and looking at fuel flowage, revenues, and the whole goal of this is to see if the airports could operate as an enterprise fund and solely finance and be self-sustainable. You got a long ways to go in looking at costs that are covered by the county, how much revenue is potentially made, and other opportunities that you're missing out on revenue. Whether it's leases, operational standards of rules and regulations, minimum standards, all those things will be looked at. And so the one thing that you guys asked for last time was, when are we going to sit down and meet? And so what he's looking at is potentially this time next month. So I think it's the 9th, is November 9th
Okay.
is the meeting. He's open, really. He had asked for a little bit longer of time, but talking to Todd, I think, we have the list of ideal improvements, right, that Todd sent me for both airports. We'd like to get your feedback on what's working, what's not working at each of the airports, and be able to consolidate all of that. I know Todd has a meeting, the VOCC meeting on the 28th of November, and I think it'd be good to get your feedback and consensus going into that meeting, and then after that, really start to wrap it up and look at what type of assets should be put into place, improvements at these airports, and really close in the pro forma income statement, and how feasible it is to potentially bring on additional staff, and function as an enterprise, and then ultimately in January present the findings to the BOCC and wrap it up. So, but where we are now, we've gone through the financials. We're still getting a few other items, document discovery, and have a semi pro forma income statement so far. And it looks like over the last 5 years, the airports have made net income in the positive. So there's 1 year that it was not, but with COVID, it was actually prior to COVID. Like everybody knows, in Florida, things were open, so business was doing fairly well. But there's still things we need to look at as far as legal costs from the county. If the attorney picks up the phone, if you were an enterprise fund, you'd have to pay for that out of pocket. Matching grants, you'd have to make that out of pocket. So there's pros and cons in both, and I think Dave's doing a good job in evaluating those. So.
Questions, anybody? What is it that you'd like from us on November 9th?
So talking to Dave, it's to walk through the financial information, walk through the items that he's discovered of opportunities, and get kind of one-on-one feedback. I said, knowing you guys, you work, you got things to do, you already designated your time to this. Is there a way that we could, we have the information for the list of improvements, give you a survey of sorts to guide what that discussion would be in person? Can we not just send you a list of questions, get your feedback, and then from that, consolidate it down to maybe 15 or 30 minutes? But the goal is to just have an open conversation.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that, and you see this taking 15 to 30 minutes, this conversation?
That's not what he wanted.
Well, so
He's a PhD guy. He's very knowledgeable. I really thoroughly enjoyed my conversation with him this morning. I think he's going to be a lot of help in getting the airports with a goal and a strategy. But to get the most use out of your time, I don't think it's a presentation that takes 15 to 30 minutes. He wanted, upwards of 2 hours of your time, to be able to, talk about the subject and then get your feedback, talk about the next one, and almost like a decision tree. If we do this, this happens. But if you go this way, something else.
If at least some of us could find the time Thursday morning, is there a place we could meet? Todd, that you're aware of a space where we could get together, a conference room somewhere?
I don't have that answer now. I'd have to figure that out
Okay.
another time. But if that is what we're going to go with, then I'll have to take some careful thought and planning. Yeah.
Is there any reason why we would not, thank you, Andy, is there any reason why that would not be appropriate? Is there a sunshine issue with respect to,
For time,
no, with respect to some or all of us meeting
Sunshine.
outside of the public eye?
yeah.
Yes.
So then it would have to be something that's a public discussion.
I mean, it can be discussed, if I'm understanding this, it can be discussed in the setting that we're in right now. It would just be lengthy.
Yeah.
Because not only am I going over the projects, which however long that takes, and then open to the public and things like that. I mean, we normally meet for an hour, sometimes an hour and a half. So if this, we could do it around the same time for sure. It just would be longer.
Start an hour earlier, 1 o'clock instead of 2 o'clock.
And that's what he had mentioned, come a little early. And, he mentioned maybe 12 or 1 o'clock.
Right.
The time frame for this is, when we move something like that, it's sensitive to many different factors with the county. So
Exactly.
it's something we'll have to carefully look at, even changing it in 1 hour. So I can get back to you on that.
Okay. I mean, I'd like for those of us that have the time to be available to provide this input. It's just a question of doing it the right way. And it's a little bit frustrating that all sorts of staff can get together behind closed doors in a conference room and discuss whatever the heck it is they need. Once you get appointed to something that you're not getting paid for, all of a sudden, you've got this restriction about you can't talk about anything, can't even say hello to each other off subject. So it's a bit of a pain, I have to say. Let's figure out how we can make this work. Does anybody have any ideas?
If I may make a motion
There we
that for next month, that this advisory board would meet 1 hour prior to our normally stated time, subject to verification confirmation with the county's attorney for compliance. That's my motion.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the table made by Carl, seconded by Keith. Any discussion about this? Is that something that would work for you? I mean, what we're trying to do here is get you the input that you need from us.
I think so. I think what we need to do, building up to that, is to consolidate those questions and make sure it's pointed, and we come away with the information that we need to go forward. I think by doing that is if we could, I'll get with Dave and we'll put together maybe a survey sheet to try to pique your interest in certain things that working off of this list. Some other things that he's seen, and talk to Todd is, being public figures in a public meeting, you have to be choice in what you can and cannot say. And there's good things that are going to come out of the study and not so good things. I think it's important to also acknowledge the other side of that coin and saying, look, we have to deal with some of these things if these other things are going to be successful, have a chance for it. It's hard to say those things in an open meeting. So I think that's where the survey, ultimately they become public record, so there's really no way to get around it. But I think we need to facilitate that in some way. So we'll be in contact through Todd and try to get your feedback prior to that meeting. So that way the hour that we do have is good.
Thank you. Any other discussion on the motion on the table?
Not on the motion.
Oh, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So, as I understand it, we have moved to propose advancing our meeting next month to 1 o'clock, pending appropriate coordination with legal and scheduling and so forth. Todd, if you could get back to us as soon as possible with that, as far as whether or not that's doable.
Is
Yes,
the
ma'am.
consensus everyone would be available
Yes.
for that? Okay. We may just have to advertise it differently or as
Okay.
a additional meeting or something. We'll figure it out.
I mean, it's either that or we meet at 2 and go till 6. We'll need more donuts.
Either way.
It's not gonna work.
I did have a question for you. This is gonna come up later in our agenda, the tenant leases, but I'm assuming you're looking at tenant leases as one of the sources of county revenue. That's a very sensitive subject as it affects a lot of pilots that rent space from the county, affects their businesses. And I was just wondering if you could tell me if that's something you've already started to take a look into to determine how these leases should be priced.
Yeah, I think from a price standpoint, when you look at the market value going up to Ocala, down into Tampa, going even further north, you guys are pretty comparable and to the point of actually on the higher level. At $35 a square foot, you're doing pretty good. But when you have different types of buildings, whether it's a corporate lease for a business or a private T hangar, they all shouldn't be $35. There's different uses, different classifications. So I think from a price point, you're doing okay. The term point of, we talk about 50 years, or if you talk about, what leverage the county reserves and what leverage the tenant reserves. I think it's off balance, is what we've seen, and it's inconsistent. But it's just, it's very broad. So it's not necessarily miss anything. It just inevitably, if something were to go wrong, it leaves it up to the interpretation of your attorney and whoever you're going against, their attorney. I think it's better to be clear and advantageous for both parties. It should be equitable. You don't want to push away business. As you said, you want people to build hangars. And so the language needs to be clear, not ambiguous. And so there's some things that we've seen, and we're looking at other leases and not, metropolitan areas that wouldn't make sense. You can't attract those same terms, right? It has to be to the market that you're looking at, whether Inverness is more of a corporate business type of center or Crystal Rivers, your weekend flyer, student pilot, what is your market going to be? And you have different types of leases that you could put in place. So that is part of our initiative, and to have a template lease. And I know the conversation that was had last meeting about a T hangar, and the question was, will this lease have the same lease as that one? Our recommendation is it shouldn't. If you're building a corporate hangar and a T hangar, it really shouldn't. Maybe the front end part of it can be the same, but it needs to be specific, but also retain your leverage. So, but overall cost point, yeah, you guys are doing okay.
You say we're doing okay, well, we're doing okay from the point of view of generating revenue, but maybe it's on the high side?
I mean, you guys made a profit 4 out of 5 years, so that's indicative of that. But it's not also a loaded cost. When you look at a public, service, is it a public service or is it operating as a business? So if you transition to an enterprise, you have to break even. You have to cover your cost every year. It's you don't have a coffer to pull from, and you got to pay for your own capital needs, operational cost. And so in doing that, we don't know fully yet from cost of fire service. Like when you have an aircraft incident, usually you have mutual aid if you're an enterprise fund. But right now, everything's coming from within county resources. If not, you contract it out for grass mowing and different things. But to really get a sense of all that, can you charge more? I think you can in certain areas. And that's going to be a hard pill to swallow, especially if you say, hey, here's the outcome of the study. Do you break it in over time to say you were charging 35? Market value right now for this area, if you're saturated, you look at your T hangar list and there's 0 vacancies on the T hangars and the box hangars. And so there's a demand. So supply and demand, you raise the cost and you never know. So it's something that we're going to look at in a matrix of what opportunities you have and if it's worth it, right? You could do that through many different ways. From, the FBO ultimately controls the fuel cost, but we looked at, potential of assessing a aircraft or airport user fee. So if you're buying fuel right now, I think the county gets 5 cents for every gallon. So whatever he decides to sell it for, county gets 5 cents. If you have your aircraft in your hangar and you never pull it out, it's great. You're getting the rent from it. But those that do come in and use the airport, there's a methodology. In the airline industry, they call it a passenger facility charge. Every time you get on a plane, you're paying $4.50 to go one leg. And the next leg's another $4.50. All that money gets paid back from the airlines back to the airport. And you could use that to develop capital improvements outside of your typical FAA grants. And why should a taxpayer pay for something that they may never use, but the user itself pays that $4.50 PFC and the airport gets to use it? So something along the lines of that, where you're not assessing it on a T-hangar tenant that may not use the airport all that much, but somebody that comes in and, flight school. If you're ramping up those operations and use of the airfield, you should kind of pay for your share of it. Just an example of a methodology that you could try to get additional revenues from. So, yes, sir.
So let me ask this, because it sounds like, just throwing this out, you may charge less for the T-hangars, but you would pay more for the box hangars.
Mm-hmm. It depends, right? I think it's a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
When you look at, is there any investment? So in a box hangar, if the county's going to build them and they're all finished out, that's one thing. But if somebody's going to come in and build their own, it depends.
Oh, okay. All right, I see where you're going with that one.
Yeah. So I think it really comes to long-term investment, right? And Andy mentioned that with, look, I'm going to commit $5 million. You guys also have to commit too of a lease term, and so it's equitable. Whereas a box hangar that's fully finished, you should look at the company's finances that come in, to see if they're going to be able to. And if you had a strip mall and you're leasing out parcels, you want to know that they're good tenants and they're going to stick around. They're going to keep their shop in order, and but working within the template, at least the front portion of it would be standard, kind of boilerplate, what the expectations before you ever step foot on the property that we expect of you. So that, I know a big theme is when you look at the airports, you start to see some commonality of color scheme, signage, landscaping. There's a process. You step out on the airfield, it's well maintained. You look at some of the aircraft on the ramp, maybe not so much. So what's missing? It's here are rules and regulations, here's our standards of operating, and hey, within your lease, it's not ambiguous anymore. It says that you can and cannot do certain things. But with that is almost a risk and reward. If you're able to, carry that investment, then you may be able to back off that revenue because they're gonna have more, operations, bring more business into the airport. I think a lot of things you could look at.
Absolutely.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you guys.
Appreciate it.
See you next month.
Thank you.
Forward to it.
Thank you.
Yep. Runway lights is next, and Andy, I don't know if you've noticed, but A2 navigational light has been repaired, and it should be outfitted with a new LED light system. So if you could do me a favor, if anyone's up in the air enjoying themselves at night, if you could just take a look and see if that brightness is adequate. Is it too bright? Is it low? But just take a look if you could. I mean, was it working? It was tested yesterday, so. But that's up and fixed, ready to go. Next is the tenant leases, but pretty much Daniel Elsey just talked about that in a nutshell. So. INF runway taxiway pavement markings. This morning I just got a scope of work. I'm just waiting for the grant agreement from FDOT. And once that comes in, start the process, and hopefully this project, maybe summer of next year. And everyone's favorite FAA training. Still cannot get in touch with the special agent. And I'm calling him all the time and emailing him. So maybe he's involved, he's out of the country, I just don't know. So I want to keep this on old business. I'm still going to try and attempt to get in touch with him and see where this is at. But yeah, I'm a squeaky wheel. So, and that's it for old business.
Please.
Hangars, there is an update. We have two potential tenants. I'm going to be doing a pre-inspection with them next week, Crystal River. So that should make this 0 vacancies across the board.
Okay.
Yep. And that'll make 18 waiting for T hangars instead of 20. Nothing for the board, and then
Did you say that the board passed a resolution on the balls?
for Tuesday, they approved it.
They
And then-
did. And so
yeah.
what is that, what exactly did they approve?
Approved that the work Duke is going to perform, and then we just bought those balls this morning.
Okay.
Yep.
So they will be installed.
At a time and date I don't know yet, it's still pretty fresh, but the technician that's going to be doing that, or the manager that's going to assign someone to go out there and do it, I'm sure I'll know hopefully soon when that's going to happen, or some type of
Great.
schedule. Shouldn't take long. It's only 3.
Right.
Okay. Now on to the projects, and I'd like to introduce Dr. Mohammadi to go over our runway extension.
Good afternoon. Mohsen Mohammadi with MDG. I've been in front of you many times before, so good to see you all again. Just an update on the runway extension project. The FAA, you probably know the history. The FAA came in to the picture and they said, we are requiring you to do an environmental assessment. That environmental assessment takes at least 1.5 years to go through that process. So the county started that process earlier this year. So that process is moving forward. The FAA has split it in 2 different phases. Phase 1, they call it pre-EA, and then phase 2 is the actual EA. So the phase 1 is to basically show what the purpose and need is for the extension of the runway. We anticipate that to be completed by February. The FAA seems to be working cooperatively with the county and their consultant ESA. So that's moving forward. At the same time, the county, because they don't want too much delay in the actual construction, they selected MDG, the consultant, to start the design for the project. So if you look at the schedule that Todd distributed, basically the design and the environmental assessment are going to happen concurrently. Typically, that doesn't happen, especially if FAA is involved with the funding of the environmental assessment and the project. They want you to finish the EA first, get what they call the FONSI, findings of no significant impact, and then they tell you you can start with the design. But the county has taken the initiative to start the design at the same time. So hopefully by the time we get the EA approved, the design is complete and the project can go to construction. And this is what you see here is kind of the anticipated construction based on what we expect the FAA to do with the EA. They have 12 months to approve the EA, but we think because of this project being a state and county funded project, mainly state funded project, they will reduce that timing. So we don't know, but for the sake of the schedule, we have put 12 months on this schedule. At the end of the project, we will be doing, once the project is constructed, let's say in December of 2025 is what we're anticipating. The runway will be open for operations, but it will be on a visual basis because it takes the FAA, there's a certain process required to do what they call an AGIS survey. They have to do imagery to verify runway coordinates, runway approaches, any obstructions. That process of doing the AGIS survey takes about 1 month to 2 months. And then unfortunately, it goes into the FAA black hole. We have no idea how long that takes. Right now, it used to be 3 months, 4 months a few years ago before COVID. Now it's 12 months, 10 to 12 months, just to go through that process and publish the approaches. So we are anticipating once we construct, you can use the runway, but it will probably be another year beyond that before you have GPS approaches on that runway. So that's the overall picture of the project right now. And if you have any questions, please let me know.
I'd like to make one quick, thank you for the Gantt chart. This is what I asked for.
You're welcome.
The pretty pictures. Could you send this to us electronically? Would you mind?
Yes, and I can send you more as well for other projects. That was just the one I had on hand.
Okay. Well, I mean, this one is fine, but if I assume you have this as a file,
I do,
if you could just email that.
no problem.
I do electronics. I don't do paper all that much. So it'll be easier for me to save than where did I put that piece of paper?
No problem.
So a question for you is, I understand you identifying the timelines out there. Based on your experience, you said there is potential for sooner. So based on your experience overall, typically how much sooner than you forecast do you typically?
That's a tough question, but the FAA, because of their workload, they're taking 12 months.
Okay.
However, but that's when they own the project. They fund it. They're basically taking charge. On a project like this, we're anticipating it will be less, maybe 10 months,
Okay.
but not much more. I will not
Okay.
raise our hopes too
No,
much.
no. That's fine. I understand the length,
Sure.
but just in what you have been seeing
Yes.
out there.
They take their 12 months.
Okay.
We just finished one project at North Palm Beach County Airport in Palm Beach County. It took at least 12 months.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
but
Thank
they
you.
were funding it. So they had control.
Anybody else? You have a note, periodic runway closure and or reduced length, but nothing up here that asterisk leads to. Where do you anticipate, where on the timeline do you anticipate the runway being closed?
Okay, so the star is actually on the construction line.
Got it.
So what's going to happen when we go through the design process? Our goal is obviously to keep the runway open while we're doing the extension as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things you can do while the runway remains open. Like if you're farther away to the east doing obstruction clearing, tree clearing, you may not need to close the full length of the runway. But as you get closer to the west, getting close to the existing threshold, you either have to close the runway or what we were anticipating or hoping is to reduce the runway length. We basically could provide a temporary displaced threshold where a runway from 4,500 feet could go to maybe 3,800 feet.
Right.
And still have the opportunity to land and take off, but at a shorter length. So some of the larger planes may not be able to use the full length.
Something like that was done with Inverness when they were extending the area line.
So what is the process by which one officially moves the threshold of a runway, of a public runway like this? Presumably, there's some amount of FAA involvement. There's a NOTAM that says that the runway is displaced and so forth?
Yes, at about 60 to 80% design, we submit to the FAA what they call a construction safety and phasing plan. The FAA goes through that whole process. Before we even start construction, the FAA approves that process.
Okay.
And then the county works with the FAA ahead of time before we start displacing thresholds to let them know. They issue a NOTAM. We have to physically, remark or move the threshold, if you will, to make sure that all that is happening, and then we can issue the NOTAM officially.
And don't want to hold you to this or anything, but your best guess, where along this construction timeline in 2025 do you expect the first threshold movement of the runway? Because that presumably will mean that the instrument approach is no longer authorized.
I'm actually surprised that you mentioned that there is instrument approach available right now because you have a lot of obstructions on the approach to 27. I thought the GPS was not even allowed on that. Is there?
Yeah,
It is.
absolutely.
Because your approach surface is not even 20-1 visual spread. It's about 12-1.
Something like that.
Meaning you don't even have the visual glide slope, if you will, at this point. So I'm surprised when you
For
mentioned
runway
it.
27?
That is correct. Yeah. So I'm not sure. That's a different issue, but you
Okay,
brought it
yeah.
up earlier. I was.
So the GPS to runway 9 has been NA for
That's-
some number of years because of the displaced
That's
threshold.
correct.
And nobody ever followed up to get the silly thing reauthorized.
Well,
So-
we have been following. I can give you an update on that.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
nobody ever got the thing reauthorized, put it
Yes.
that way.
Yeah.
And so now we're about to lose the one to the other end.
That is
At
correct.
some
During as soon as we start construction, you basically and displace the threshold, you lose. You basically become visual daytime operation.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and you think that will be where now?
In my opinion, it will be most of the construction time.
Most
Yeah.
of construction, okay.
Yes, yeah, because as soon as you start touching the lights, touching the approaches, start filling the wetlands, you basically are within the premises of the runway, and you basically have to
And
displace
did you
the
say
threshold.
that the runway would no longer be usable at night?
It's a visual runway. I mean, I guess pilots can use it if they want, but
Mm-hmm.
they will not. You will not have. We typically close the runway at nighttime on a displaced threshold, but I've seen airports keep it open, and that's something we can talk to the FAA as well.
Yeah. I mean, obviously with the flight school being there, student pilots, they need night landings.
Sure. Yeah.
So if the airport is effectively closed at night because
Yeah.
3618 doesn't work at night. So if the
Yeah.
airport is closed at night, that's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
Andy, you may get some more business.
It's
That's not how we want it.
I know.
it's a kind of a cost issue because once you displace the threshold, if you want to keep it at night, then you have to modify the lights. You have to modify the signage. There's additional costs involved. I mean, if
Yeah.
the county wants to go through that process and we have the funding, absolutely. But once typically like we did at Pedro night, we displaced the threshold. Basically, we said, we don't want to spend the money to move the lights, change the lights, and do other activities. So they basically said we'll just close the runway at nighttime.
Okay.
So, but these are discussions that could be having during the design phase.
Does
And-
James know this? That his airport is going to be closed starting at night in the middle of 2025?
No, and I'm just learning about this a few days ago as well, understanding it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Again, it could be, you could keep it open, we just have to go through the additional cost of maintaining lights at night.
I mean, the lights are there. What additional cost in?
Just
in keeping
moving
them on?
threshold lights and basically, it's not much. Again, these are the things that during the construction safety and phasing plan, we'll discuss with the FAA, get their input.
Gotcha.
And the good thing about it, by the time we get to that point, we probably have cleared all the approach. There are no trees, no obstructions. I think there's a power pole on that approach as well.
All right. Thank you.
Does no one have NVG? With their NVGs on when they go fly? All right, it was a light joke, but never mind.
Do you want to talk about the Rambo 9, why the GPS has been NA for a while?
Sure.
So if y'all remember, 3 years ago or so, we displaced the threshold on runway 9 by 200 feet because of US 19. While we were going through that process, we were coordinating with the FAA to publish the new approaches. And the FAA said, just do the field topographic survey, get the coordinates, submit that to the FAA, and they will process that, and they will publish the new approaches. Once the approaches are published, of course, you'll have your instrument approach. We went through that process. We did all the work, submitted to the FAA. The FAA, within a year and a half, they changed their mind. They said, nope, we need you to actually go through the full, what they call AGIS imagery survey. So we kept going back and forth, and finally, just recently, the FAA says, yes, we made they didn't say we made a mistake. They said we just changed our minds. And because of that, we're willing to actually fund this AGIS imagery process so that you can go through and do this go through this exercise and publish your approaches. So the county just submitted a grant to the FAA to get funding to do this new imagery survey. And once that's done, again, it goes back to the FAA's black hole. So as soon as that gets processed, you will have your GPS approach, regardless of what's happening on runway 27 extension.
Okay.
Yeah,
And do
that
you
could
have a-
happen sooner.
Do you have a timeline for that, AGF?
As soon as the grant comes in, we can start that process. So the grant may take a couple more months, I would think, maybe for the FAA to issue the grant and the county to accept it. Then estimating a couple more months for the actual work, the field work and the flights. And then it goes to FAA 8 to 12 months. So you're looking at maybe 16 months probably from now. At the most, I hope.
And we have a great group of the FAA for this district, and I've been working with them for the short amount of time I've been here, and so far they've been fantastic. So I am emailing my contact and trying to call, and I don't want to. I'm lightly bugging her. I don't want to bug her too much. So, but hopefully something soon with this grant.
And it was not just your airport. We did a project at Brooksville. I don't know if you fly to Brooksville, runway 321. We reduced the runway length by 815 feet. Same process. They said we don't need any imagery or aerial, AGIS surveys or anything. But then they came back and now they're funding that project as
Yeah.
well.
So what I'm hearing you say, in theory, looking at this timeline, the GPS runway 9 could be up maybe by the end of 2024, i.e. before the work begins on the extension of the other end of the runway.
That is correct.
So now the next question is, so now we haven't closed the runway, we've simply displaced the threshold of 27.
Right.
Is the instrument approach to 9 still authorized?
Yes.
It is?
Yes. That's an approach.
And
Exactly.
it'll simply be, yeah, but you're doing an approach to a 3,700-foot runway instead of a 4,500-foot.
That is correct. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then that'll be going until such point as the runway is closed altogether.
Yeah, if for some reason we need to close the runway for remarking, because during that construction period, there will be times where you have to close the runway at all, fully close it. But that's just a few days maybe during the construction.
Okay.
And then once you open, by then you'll have your GPS approach on now runway 9, but the visual still is going to go for 27 until it's published.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Anything? That's good news, at least.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the fuel tanks replacement. We are funded for that. FDOT should be sending me their grant agreement by the 27th of October. And once I have that, hopefully a quick trip to staff and then on its way to BOCC for approval. Yep. Hopefully we can get started on that as quickly as we can. Wetland removal wildlife study, that's still ongoing as planned. Should be scheduled to be complete by January of next year. And this also coincides with the runway extension as well. That's it, really.
By when of next year, I'm sorry?
January of next year.
January?
And then it'll go through an internal review process. About 6 months, I believe. It could be up to that long.
Okay.
Next is INF airspace study obstruction removal. We have changed consultants, and we are developing a scope of work, talking with, actually have a meeting next week with FAA and FDOT to discuss what's the plan and how to move forward on removing these off-airport obstructions. And there's a lot. And like I mentioned before, there's a public outreach involved and just trying to figure out the best way forward for this. This is going to take some time.
Okay.
More to follow. All right, Inverness's Business Park. Construction is moving. If you haven't been out there yet, that area looks totally different than what it did a few months ago. I believe they're done with the retention pond. They cut a lot of material out of there. Approximately 125,000 cubic yards is what we're going to be end up left with. That's a lot. And if you haven't seen the stockpiles out there, it looks like we're almost building a pyramid. So it's below. It's below. It's not that high, but and that's still on schedule for phase one to be completed by December 24th. Yeah. And then for phase two, I'm working with another consultant and the grant with Florida Commerce and trying to get that out as quickly as we can. There is going to be a time frame where there's going to be no construction out there for, I'm hoping as little as possible. But when that starts to get kicked off, you'll start to see more dirt flying around there. The good thing about that extra material though, is that we can use that to our benefit. Any of the projects that require it, now we don't have to pay for it. It's already right there, ready to go. Just got to pick it up. Yep. And last but not least is the corporate hangar.
We're wondering what FY means.
That might be a typo. It can't come to mind right now. I don't know why. I have no idea why that's there. Maybe I was about to type something and then who knows? Well, Mr. Elsey, would you like to come up and talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
So I'll give you a recap.
Yeah, I guess that's probably really what we need.
Yeah. So what we've been tasked with is looking at, first off, site selection, as Todd talked about. When you go out to Inverness, the ground has a pretty steep grade to it. So fortunately, things worked out. Got the dirt from the business park that is going to be moved in along the future taxiway that's going to be built out to the business park. So potential tenant, looking at building a hangar, 12,000 square foot hangar with an access road. And we tried to, initially it was to be a budding airport, South Airport Road, but then you would have a long taxiway to get to the future taxiway. Or, shortest path for taxiing, save on fuel, put you closer to the taxiway. But then you have longer utilities, longer roadway. That ended up being the best case cost-wise. That's what we're looking at. So an access road, parking, ultimately the hangar, an apron, utilities, drainage. But in that process, we looked at 3 different sites and ultimately settled on one I think is going to provide you the most economics over time, because you could put in the hangar for 12,000 square feet. You could do 3 more of them. You could do 4 60 by 60 hangars, 2, 50 by 50 hangars, a lot of different things you could do in a 6-acre parcel. And so orienting this hangar to accommodate future growth, but also when we evaluated the site selection, the type of tenant, potentially a helicopter operator, you don't want to commingle that with fixed wing aircraft. So trying to put them in a place that they can come in, come out, and not impact other tenants. And look, and if that doesn't work out for that tenant, it's well suited to provide an operation for other fixed wing aircraft. So where we are now is looking at different options, whether it's the most economical approach, trying to pare down some of the site work, but then also working with Todd for dovetailing into the Department of Commerce grant. If they see it as an extension of that taxiway, they'll pay for it. So they'll pay for the apron, they'll pay for the taxi lane, the roadway to get to it. They're not going to pay for the hangar, but the way costs are right now, anywhere from $250, $200 to $250 a square foot for a hangar, and depending on how you want to build it out, it gets costly. So if you have total $3 million for the hangar, it gets eaten up pretty quick. If you have to put all your money into getting to the hangar via the road and getting to the taxiway, you could easily spend over $1 million just doing that. So I think we've come a long way. I think it's the right place. We'll have a meeting next Monday to walk through to make sure that this is the right path forward, and hopefully get going at the end of November, after maybe sooner.
Hope so.
All right.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it. Any questions? No. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, this might not be the appropriate time for a public person to speak.
It is not. That time has come and gone. That was at the beginning of the meeting.
I didn't know because I thought maybe after each thing you would ask for public input.
Only if we have agenda items that we are publishing.
Oh, okay. Well, it's on the agenda then.
Motion as an agenda items that we are moving on, that we're making a decision on.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
What else?
That's it.
That's all we have? Next month, maybe 1 o'clock?
Maybe.
Maybe.
As soon as we know something, I'm sure to let you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else have anything?
No.
Anybody have an issue with adding a late public comment from somebody that has been waiting patiently?
Well, I was going to,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead. I was going to say, none at all.
I don't, but I was going to ask, should we build in a second public comment after we have gone through so much material?
We certainly could. If there could be any number of things that we talk about that beg questions, beg comments, and so forth from the public.
Yeah.
Okay. For now, ma'am.
Thank you. I appreciate the patience. My name is Diane Paquette, and I live on Flight Path Court in Crystal River, so I'm kind of familiar with the airport, but I'm not familiar with the extension. And I only wanted to know, is it a done deal? I mean, it's been approved by everyone other than the environmental studies, so it's going to be done?
Yes.
Because-
That is the plan.
Okay, because I live, I'm on a committee for our Crystal Paradise Estates, and many people there are opposed. I'm not, but many people are. And they have a lot of questions, so I just wanted to know if it was a done deal, so.
You live, your community is east of the airport then?
It's kind of surrounds the airport,
Okay,
but it is on the east end, yes.
okay, on the east end.
And I'm right, the final approach where they do their pre-flight, the plane looks at my sofa. So I just hope that they are able to make that turn. So that was my question. I just wondered if it's been approved by everyone, subject to the environmental study and everything.
Yes, it has been. There's been a lot of talk about it, both public and among staff and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I think any concerns that you have, I'd be happy to talk to you about it afterwards and maybe help you with any
Well,
questions.
I did send an email, but it wasn't ever answered. So I kind of thought it went like in the FAA hole. I don't know, the dark hole. I didn't know.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I obviously I don't know.
I didn't send it to you. But
No, yeah. I would have answered.
Did you send it to me?
I sent it to a gentleman named Quincy.
Okay. You can just direct everything to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I don't want to take any more of your time. I can just do that. Yeah.
Here's my card.
Ask my questions to you then. Thank
Yeah.
you so much for allowing me to speak.
No problem at all. Thank you for coming and for listening so patiently. Anybody have an issue with adding a public comment at the end?
I think it's a good idea.
I agree. Okay. Would you mind, Danae, would you mind After presentations, after board communication, or right before presentations?
Okay.
What do we think?
Yeah, we can add it.
Okay.
Do we need, is that something we need a motion on or no?
I would make a motion that we add it, after, and before the presentations.
Just before
Just
presentations?
before presentations.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Luis seconds. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. So just add it right before presentations then.
Yeah.
And we'll keep them short. We'll want to enforce a time limit. And there's no reason to drag these meetings on by having a whole lot of wandering of topics, shall we say.
Is that included with the first?
No,
Public?
it would be a separate.
Be a separate, okay.
time. Yeah. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I second the motion.
Okay, made by Mark, second by Luis. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.